So welcome back, everyone. This is the second in a series of interviews that I'm having as Director of Sport at the Canterbury Academy with some of our key sports staff that are involved with our sixth form sports programmes. And I'm delighted to have Mark Dayson and Tony Kesasoglu with me today, who are very much the I suppose the integral part of the sports science team and play a huge role across the programme, not only with our students, but also with our coaches as well. And that's something that we'll come on to. So, you know, any students that are thinking, any families that are thinking of their sons, their daughters coming to our sixth form programme for September 2021, you know, these guys will have a big involvement with those students and are very much part of the sort of the collective way we go about working with them. So let's just start here with Mark. Mark, can you just sort of outline your background a little bit?
Yeah, I'm a physiotherapist for the Academy, lead on sort of all things sports medicine, really. My background is as a runner. So I was a sort of regional level runner, run around just under 31 minutes for 10K, which was probably my preferred distance. And then once my running career finished, I then wanted to study physiotherapy, which I'd wanted to do for quite a long time, but didn't feel that I could immerse myself in study and still be training sort of twice a day and recovering and having to work and earn a living as well. Unfortunately, I wasn't good enough to earn money from it. And so once I finished physiotherapy, alongside sort of postgraduate physio development, I also worked with England Athletics and Kent Sport, which developed a lot of my role and contact within athletics predominantly. That then developed into a role at the Canterbury Academy where the physiotherapy began, really. And all those years ago, we began just a couple of hours a week supporting Academy sixth form students, pretty much in a broom cupboard, which thankfully has now developed into a really nice space in terms of physiotherapy room. Most of my postgraduate study and work has been in sport, musculoskeletal based. And it's ranged across both individual and team sports. I still work with British Athletics through their DICE program and through coach education workshops with England Athletics. But a lot of my work now is basically academy across sports, and particularly with basketball, where I've been working from under 14s up through to including under 20s, and this year just taken on role of lead physio sports medicine for the GB Maxes, so that'll be up to the age of sort of 50 now. So right through age ranges, I've been to 10 Europeans and lots of international games and travel and tournaments with GB and with the club as well. So Kent Crusaders, who I lead on their physio side of things. And that's really where we are today. I'm just in the process of finishing sort of final corrections to my doctorate, so that's passed, and that was on screening in basketball, which is something that I'm really interested in. Along with Tony, we worked together on that quite a bit, and that's pretty much where we're up to, I think. Yeah.
That's very impressive, and I think that 31 minutes 10K time is going to put a lot of people under pressure, absolutely. But I think, you know, one of the big things that comes out from Mark's summary there is the range of experiences he's had. And I know as a director of sport and as a head coach of one of the programs, I've had lots of valuable conversations with Mark about coaching and about working with young athletes and everything, and that's something that, in addition to his sports science, he also brings that to the party as well, which will probably come out a little bit later. Thank you, Mark. Tony, do you just want to sort of run through your background and your experiences for us, please?
Yes, Phil. Thank you for having me in. Very quickly, I'm in charge of the sport science and strength and conditioning side of the sixth form program. Myself, starting as an athlete, I was many years back. I used to play basketball. I managed to sign a professional contract by the age of 18, but then a couple of injuries didn't allow me to push this further, and that's where the studying journey started for me. So I joined the University of Kent back in 2012, immediately after the Olympics. And I'm still part of the university technically. So it's been 9 years for me in academia and at the working side of it as well. So in terms of sports science, I did my undergraduate on that and my master's on optimal performance and how to support athletes. My main focus of my undergrad and my master was in exercise physiology and training science as well. And back in the days where I was about to finish my undergrad, I had the chance to join the Canterbury Academy initially as an intern. And then it turned into a part-time thing. But then 2 years after, I had the chance to pursue my PhD in exercise physiology and training load management. And this is where I actually got involved with the Canterbury Academy even more. So part of my job was supporting athletes, and the other part of it was doing my research in training load. Now, to break this down is pretty much how much training an individual should go through, and how that's summarized on a weekly or on a monthly basis. So yeah, a part of me is sports science and sports physiology. But then the other side of it is strength and conditioning coaching. That's something I've always been interested, pretty much since I had my very first injury at my knee, where I really thought, you know what, I need to study this and learn this and actually help other people not to have the same injuries or the same experiences. And I think that really helped me and shape who I am today. So in terms of strength and conditioning, the Canterbury Academy helped me massively to get my UKSA accreditation, which is the highest certificate basically for the United Kingdom. And throughout this journey, I had the chance to work within the Great Britain basketball environment. I had the chance to serve as part of the Saracens rugby club for 3 years. I was in charge of the Kent regional program, and at the same time I had the chance to support a couple of track and field athletes in competing in national, regional and international level. With that, I had the opportunity, and I was quite blessed to be able to support some athletes going to Rio Olympics, European and World Championships from 2016 and onwards. And hopefully this year we'll be able to send another athlete to Tokyo. And I think all those experiences shape the person I am today, Phil.
I mean, that's fantastic. And again, you know, thank you for providing such a detailed summary. And I think anyone sort of watching and tuning in will realise that we've got two very, very highly qualified, but also highly experienced members of staff sort of driving the sports science input to an extent, you know. And I think also something that's just come out of that as well is that, you know, one of the things we talk about here is the importance of what students do when they finish our sixth form. I think both Tony and Mark would be good people to have discussions about higher education, about what's out there in terms of courses, in terms of almost a direction of sports science now, and that sort of that input from people who have been there, one at the coalface, but also are still actually in the process of research, I think is really valuable. So it's almost an additional thing that we're able to do is provide students with that sort of post sixth form advice and guidance as well. So let's get a little bit into the detail. And I suppose one of the things about the sixth form program is that, you know, we're in a school environment, so education is one of our main purposes. I just wonder if I come to you first, Mark, here, and just talk to us a little bit about how you see your role in terms of what sort of things do you educate the students about? Certainly when they first arrive, you know, in September, you know, they've come from GCSEs, all of a sudden they're now in a sixth form. What are some of the sort of key things that you feel that you need to sort of, one, make them aware of, but also support them with?
I think there's a number of key areas, but a number of key things to consider when we're educating the students. So we want to make them more proactive at looking after themselves, and I think that kind of forms the early basis of where we start. Certainly, right from the induction day, where we're teaching them about technique, foam rolling, sprints, jumps, and we're looking at all those variables from day one to engage them to get some group interaction. But it is very educational from the start. I think the other thing is trying to understand what the students are studying. So some will be studying A levels in PE and BTEC sport, but not all of them. Some may have other subjects or completely different subjects. And so trying to tie the theory to practice for some is quite easy because they've got that background from the teaching at the school. But for others, they won't have had that background. So the education becomes a little bit more important to give them some context as to why we're asking you to do this practically, or why I might be implementing a certain intervention. And of course, as a physio, one of the fundamental things that we do is to educate people on what we find, what its prognosis is, what treatments we can offer. We agree those in collaboration with goal setting with the athlete or the patient or service user, depending on what you want to term them, and so that they can understand the benefits or the risks associated with that. So education is kind of fundamental and underpins everything. And for me, I also deliver on the DICE program for basketball at the academy. So education really transcends all of those key areas: lifestyle, nutrition, physical, psychological, doping, which the guys will have delivered on Wednesday from an external expert. So it's pretty much every area. It's working out how much you can give them in bite size so they remember it, so they take it on board. And I think that when we're able to do that succinctly, it hits home a bit more when we give them examples, and then we try and get them to find solutions or raise questions, and we can help them with the solutions after, rather than just giving them information. I think that athletes are quite good working together and trying to find a solution to something. Recently we had a chat around sleep and different things that sleep affect, its negativity with suboptimal sleep. We've yet to have the follow-up. Part of that is for the athletes to monitor their sleep using an app, and then to get back to us and discuss, how can I improve the sleep? What are the strategies that we can have? I think that works quite well. And I guess the last part is then, as you've kind of just previously mentioned, is thinking about the education leading on from when they leave school. And of course, Tony's been at university, he's doing a PhD at the moment. So he's a great person to speak to in terms of current sports science at University of Kent. My doctorate was at University of Kent as well. But also I'm a lecturer at Canterbury Christ Church University. So those that are interested in sort of the health professions or sports therapy, rehabilitation, they've got two pretty good overviews of the career pathways from sport and from a health professional at the academy.
Brilliant. And I think, you've given some great examples there. I love the example of the sleep as well, and it's the attention to detail that we're able to provide to our programs, but hopefully caters for the individual's needs, definitely. I mean, Tony, can you just almost summarize how do you and Mark work together? I suppose what I'm interested in is almost getting across the idea that when the students arrive, we have this 2-day induction program, but almost the lead up to that first half term, there's screening, there's some fitness testing, you're working with the coaches, to an extent, I suppose, across the numerous programs we've got, practically every student will get some form of individualized program, which is a lot of work for the coaching staff and for you two as well. But can you just sort of summarize, how that process works, Tony?
Yes, so myself as an SNC, but as a sports scientist as well, I really value the process of individualizing things nowadays. I think that's a key part, even when it comes to education. So for instance, how you approach a certain athlete or a certain coach, but also in terms of training per se. So yes, so when a kid arrives at the Canterbury Academy, we try to make sure that the kid gets the very basic information straight from the beginning. And that's, as Mark said, that's part of doing some very basic strength and conditioning exercises the right way, being able to know a very basic mobility session that they'll need for recovery later on the day. Or that's some basic psychological or nutritional skills that they need as soon as the program starts. Outside of that, and as we're heading towards the second week of the term, we make sure that there is a basic fitness testing screening going on for each individual athlete. The testing involves a variety of assessments in terms of how fast the athlete is, so assessing pure speed, assessing low body power, so how far or how high the athlete can jump, assessing strength endurance or maximum strength capabilities of each athlete, analyzing his body fat. So all those measurements help us get a snapshot of where the athlete is at a right stage. And then based on that, we repeat that testing protocol 3 times a year. So we have a clear view of how the athlete progresses over the terms, and most importantly, how the athlete progresses throughout the years. So myself and my personal philosophy on this is that we really value at the Canterbury Academy the process of growth and maturation. And we try to always keep an eye of how the athlete should be loaded, or in some cases deloaded, because sometimes training less might be more benefits for the athlete and the coach. So yeah, part of what I do at the Canterbury Academy is constantly screening and going through fitness testing protocols with the athletes, as well as you mentioned, supervising and providing or prescribing a training program for each athlete based on those individualized needs. And I think that's a key bit of what we do right. And I think we're one of the few academies in the country who do that very well. I think what we do well is mixing the information that's coming from the physiotherapist and mixing the information coming from the coach and the sports scientist in order to provide an accurate program for the athlete. So for instance, mark screening might highlight an issue at the hip action. And a similar thing may be also highlighted from the fitness testing. So for instance, the athlete might also have a deficit in his core capacity. And therefore, just to give you an example, although the athlete may be a footballer, that speed and power is an important capability, we may sit down and think carefully and say, you know what, the athlete is not very ready for providing this power output that we want. And we got to take it a step back, making sure that the athlete loses excessive weight, make sure he uses his hips in the right direction or for the right cause, making sure that we strengthen the core before we actually load the athlete further. And so, yeah, I think that's all from my side.
I mean, that's brilliant. And I think what hopefully people that are tuning into this and having the opportunity to listen will realise that this is not one size fits all. This is an approach that is, as Tony and Mark have said, very individualised. Mark, you know, we're about 10, 15 minutes through and we haven't mentioned the dreaded injuries yet, but it happens. And, you know, young athletes, sometimes there's, you know, there are possibly sort of mechanical issues, different physical issues they might bring with them to us. Equally, it can be the fact that all of a sudden daily training, and, you know, it's interesting that Tony was talking about training loads, but occasionally that, you know, the daily training can contribute to overuse injuries possibly. You know, an athlete, a student gets injured on our programs, Mark, what support is available? How does your role work there?
Well, I think just starting on the injuries front, I think that most non-contact injuries tend to be either or a combination of biomechanics or load. It tends to be a combination, and they're things that we can adjust and that we can get right. So if we're for instance being presenting with patterns of muscle strain throughout one of our sports, then we've got to look at what we're doing to make sure we reduce that. So monitoring our injuries is really critical for us to understand any patterns that are emerging, which obviously we do throughout the year. We have a pretty impressive injury record, really, and actually it was brought up during my doctorate Viva around our injury record for basketball. In the years that I've been at the academy, I think I've been there 9 years now, we've had in basketball one partial ACL tear, which is probably lower than every other club, every other academy. And that's in part because of all the things that we've spoken about, from the induction day through to the individualized training, strength and conditioning programs, the prehab, the rehab, the recovery that we try and get our athletes to do really contributes to that. It isn't about what I do, because effectively as a physio, the time that I get with athletes is often I get to see them when they're injured, other than the induction and the education. So it's all the stuff that goes on around that by people like Tony and the coaches that are doing that and encouraging their athletes to do what they've been taught to do. In terms of the injury, so athletes will go through a booking system. So they will liaise with their coach. If they feel they need to see me, it could be something minor like maintenance, soft tissue work. It might be an injury that's going to keep them out for a bit longer, but they book that through sixth form, and they're able to access me throughout the week. We will then assess the injury. We'll discuss the positives and negatives. We'll discuss what their current training is and their competition, because that does sometimes have a bearing on what their goals are and what's realistic to get them back to. So if we have an understanding of what's coming up, I think that's quite critical in trying to keep the athlete on board and motivated, particularly if it's something that's a little bit longer term, where they can quite easily lose motivation. I think one of the strengths of the academy with athletes that's injured is that because we're within a school environment as an academy, athletes will still attend their training sessions with their peers and get support in that way. Even though they might not do all the training, there is always something that they can do. So the social side of it and the support that they get from their peers and from their coaches is a really critical part. And of course, we've then got treatment sessions throughout, treatment and assessment sessions. We've got rehab sessions that run generally on a Thursday, which is open. So we will just have an open rehab session where anyone from sport, performing arts and dance as well will come in mixed sessions. They work quite well. They work well together. They're normally grouped between different areas, which predominantly is lower limb, ankle, knee and hip. We break them down to 3 areas, similar to our part of our prehab protocols are broken down into 3 areas. And then we have this ongoing communication and correspondence with Tony. So quite often I will finish working with an athlete. We'll both walk downstairs into the S&C room and discuss the things that I want Tony to look at implementing or to assess within an S&C conditioning context. So the synergy between what we do in terms of assessment, treatment, prehab, rehab, and education is linked pretty closely to what S&C does. Sometimes from clinic straight down to S&C room, or from clinic straight into the gym environment. And of course, you know, with cricket, you'll have seen this year, Phil, how Tony and I have worked with your athletes within the S&C sessions that have been running for cricket in that first part of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that's really detailed. What a great explanation. And yeah, I suppose I want to come on to that a little bit. I've watched both of you guys work. And Tony, we've got a range of facilities, and there's a little bit, let's be honest, a bit of a wow factor about the upstairs gym, where, you know, we have a decent gym, obviously, but there's more to it than that, isn't there? And a lot of what your work will be, I suppose, a real range of methods. And I almost don't want students to think that when they come here, they're just going to spend a lot of time doing bench press and squats in the gym upstairs, because there's far more to it. Could you just give us almost a snapshot of the range of things? I'm thinking about the work you've been doing on the track, the work you guys do on the beach occasionally, the hill work you'll do, the opportunity to go over to Langton to use the pool when that's available. I mean, there really is a range of things. We probably haven't got time to go through everything, but can you give a little bit of a snapshot of the type of stuff that the guys end up doing when they're here, please, Tony?
Yes. One of the things I'm going to say here is how lucky the students are in comparison to where we were as students back in the days, without having access to all those facilities, all this equipment, and now how science now is helping us to be able to support the kids in a better way. So I think one of the very first things I got to highlight is the facilities, the Art to Stay facilities we have down at the Canterbury Academy. With, in reality, having 2 gyms in place, one where we use for cardiovascular purposes. So when the athlete needs to pick up his fitness or her fitness, we'll have access to a facility full of treadmills, rowing machines, cycling ergometers. And at the same time, downstairs we have another facility that is purely for sport performance purposes, and in particular for Olympic weightlifting. As on top of all those, an athlete joining the Canterbury Academy will have access to a track and field nice facility. So a track 400 meters length. He or she have access to a swimming pool, as you said, for rehabilitation purposes, and sessions during the off-season period. He'll have access to a nice sand area where we can actually push strength and conditioning sessions and work with some external resistance, like the sand. So yes, the athlete gets a variety of support. And I think what you said, yes, we are trying to switch the focus from a traditional bench press or barbell back squat kind of session. And we try to, as I said earlier, individualize the things, but also try to make the session as much enjoyable for the athlete, as well as more functional or applicable to the sport, if you like. So for instance, I'll give a very basic example so athletes and parents understand. If I have a cricketer, it's pointless to start a session with a barbell back squat straight. So we'll pretty much start either out there training outdoors or in the gym. We'll start down on the ground. We'll make sure that the core is ready to go. We'll make sure that the shoulders are ready to go. We'll take the athlete through a very basic isometric session just to make sure everything is ready in terms of musculoskeletal functions. So there is no right or wrong way, but if you like, we are trying to specify things as much as possible, and we're trying to give the athlete the best experience for their bodies.
Fantastic. And I think, something that comes across is a very professional, a measured approach. It's obviously being thought out very carefully, but it was really nice to hear you talk about it's got to be enjoyable. And I think that's something that, all of us, we've had involvement in elite sport, but, something that sort of maybe brings this program together is that we want the students not to see this as a chore, as something they enjoy. So I suppose my final question to both of you is almost asking you to reflect on what it is that you enjoy about being involved with this program. So if I start with you, Mark, and then we'll come to Tony.
Yeah, I think probably the best thing is watching athletes develop. And that doesn't really matter what level they are or what sport they're in. I think it's really rewarding to see people that you think can achieve so much more just by coming into the academy where they may not be in great shape, but getting fit, losing weight, and then being able to achieve some performance outcomes that are more aligned to what we believed their capabilities to be. And when they start to realize this, their motivation increases, and then it becomes more of a game of trying to hold them back for them not doing too much. So I think that we can look at performance outcomes, and that's quite an obvious one to look at. And at times I can be quite performance driven. I'm just the same as everyone else. I like to win. I don't like losing and traveling away with the basketball team, because obviously I sit on the bench home and away. Losing is not particularly enjoyable, but it is about the process, and it is about the development of athletes, because ultimately we want to put them in a brilliant place to move on, whether that's guys looking for scholarships in the States, whether it's thinking about their education, they're on top of that so that they can get a place at a great university over here, whatever it might be. We're looking at them as a process of development, and seeing where they go on to is really just as rewarding as it is working with them throughout their time at the academy.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Tony, what about yourself?
At the first instance, I got to say that I really enjoy the facilities. So I really feel blessed of being able to work next to a track, next to an indoors facility, having access to multiple gyms and a physiotherapy room, and all the facilities I mentioned earlier, basically. So I think that's a very key thing that athletes and parents should listen to, the art of facilities we have. Second thing, as Mark said, is supporting the athlete and actually showing the athlete what they're capable to do. Again, that's a bit of a cliche thing to say when it comes to fitness, but you got to get better of what you were before. And as Mark said, for an individual, getting better might be joining a university and having a scholarship that would never be able to get beforehand, or being able to go to the US and pursue a professional career. So I think that's the other thing. But again, for me, another very important thing that I mentioned earlier is being able to learn and educate the kids in a way that they're not going to destroy their bodies. And I think that's also important when it comes to elite sport. parents and kids, athletes should be aware that there should be very hard training sessions. We're really going to push the athletes to achieve their best. But at the same time, I think that has to be done in a way that we protect the athlete's body. We make sure that the athlete graduate from our academy healthy, well-educated, and quite knowledgeable about how to exercise.
Guys, I mean, that's fantastic. Well, both of you have summarised really well at the end there, and it's a good place to finish this. And listen, hopefully what comes out for those of you who are watching this and contemplating a sixth form at the Canterbury Academy is, I don't know, the passion, the commitment, and the real approach of actually making sure that no stone is unturned. And thanks ever so much. If you need more information, anyone watching this, our website, the Canterbury Academy, does have lots more information about elite sport and the options you have here. And please take a look, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thanks very much.